John 16:33. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Tragedies, losses, and uncertainties are all a part of life. It's not a matter of if, but when. So when tragedy strikes in your marriage, how do you cope? How do you navigate grieving with your spouse? Or how do you support your spouse when they're grieving? I'm your host, Marley Arnold, and this is the conversation I'm going to be having today with Laurie Lokey. Laurie is a licensed professional counselor based out of Spring Hill, Tennessee. She created an individual intensive therapy model for healing and trauma. And she is passionate about helping people and couples on their journey to find hope and resiliency. I'm excited to talk to her today. Laurie, thank you so much for being here and for joining us on the Wind-Shaped Marriage podcast. We're so happy to have you today.
I am so grateful to be a part of it. I love Wind-Shaped and I love what it represents and the many couples that y'all help through that ministry.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad to have you. In the intro to this episode, I read a verse from John chapter 16 that I do think would be helpful to reread just to kind of set the stage for our conversation this morning. So I'm going to read here from John chapter 16, verse 33. That says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So we started off saying that, tragedies, losses, uncertainties, grief, like these are all a part of everyone's life that we'll experience, not a matter of if, but when. And, to the couples, it's a unique dynamic when you're walking through grief because you're going through it together. You're walking through something not just as an individual, but you have your spouse there as well. And so whether or not it's affecting you directly or indirectly, it's still affecting the dynamics of your marriage, which is super unique. Sure. So before we jump into just how to navigate that as a couple and as a married couple, how to walk through those seasons, could you first tell us a little bit just about your background and what you bring to the table as far as helping individuals and helping couples navigate grief? I think you created an individual intensive therapy model. Mm-hmm. So just tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, we say as counselors, we become a counselor to heal our own wounds. And I think that's been my story. Had a lot of trauma in my background. And I became a counselor and did a lot of work on those things. Was married to Bill in 2007, and he was the clinical director at on-site workshops, and I continued to develop an intensive model because what I was finding is if we really go into a person's life and heart, we have things in our life that protect our heart, and I call those strategies. They protect our heart and they keep us from trusting in the goodness of God. And so, part of a work of an intensive is to go in and find out what are those lies, what are those beliefs, what are those roles that we have become accustomed to and we've normalized because they feel normal, that are getting in the way of us living freely. And most of those lies and those places of control are rooted in fear or shame. And so it's really going in and going, where are those places that we're stuck, that God really wants to, it's Isaiah 61. He really wants us to be free. He wants those chains and those places that we don't believe or we struggle with to be broken off so we understand who God is and the goodness of his character. And so in that, I did a lot of trauma work and I was doing intensives and I was finding the freedom and I want to give back the freedom that God's been given to me, and share that with others in these intensives. And in 2018, Bill was diagnosed with prostate cancer. But it was the aggressive form, and we basically started going to MD Anderson every 3 weeks for different treatments and clinical trials. And for 6 years, we pretty much got bad news every single time. In the midst of those 6 years, that was 2018, and in 2020, when we actually had to live down in Houston for Bill to do some chemo for 3 months. The very last week, my son-in-law, a father of 5 children, was in a mountain bike accident, and he became a quadriplegic. He was paralyzed from the chest down. And so we have complicated grief. We have the grief of my husband fighting for his life. And then now we have the grief of my son-in-law losing his mobility and going to the Shepherd Center and not being able, it's COVID, and the grandchildren can't see him. And then in that was 2022 in the fall, my 91-year-old father falls and actually is paralyzed in the same way that my son-in-law is. And he goes to be with Jesus. And then in 2023, Bill gloriously, he gave talks at WindShape about life after life, and talks about his calling, that cancer was his calling. And then he is now fully alive with the Lord. So it's not been without, like just recently we had to move, and that's a whole nother grief. And my son-in-law's father died of prostate cancer. So we have not been without loss and tribulation and grief, and how to unpack that, and how to still live with hope of God being good and how much He loves us. That was a long answer.
Wow. No, I mean, it's hard to have an appropriate response with all of those things that you shared. I appreciate you sharing them and being vulnerable and like letting us into that, though, so that we have a better understanding in this conversation of where you're coming from. And yeah, so I'm sorry, but I am thankful that you were willing to share all of that with us.
Yes. Well, I share it because I know there are people out there that have just had one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And it feels like the world has intensified, and maybe they're just starving. Maybe they're just looking for, how do I take my next breath?
Right.
How do I keep going? I don't know how to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about, I mean, goodness, even if you took one of those things, right? Thinking about the couple, I'm curious what you would say to the couple who is entering a season of grief. So there has been a health diagnosis, there has been an accident, a loss of a child, or something that is very dramatic and hard. How do you just begin navigating that season with your spouse?
Yeah. So both, the issue that I've seen with couples, and even with Bill and I, we had to recognize that we're each going to grieve differently. And it's not a judgment. It's not a judgment of right or wrong. It's maybe one person likes to go off to a quiet place and let out their grief, or maybe another person is going to get really busy to avoid feeling their grief. But there's going to be all these different stages of their grief, and they're going to hit them at different times. The problem is when we're grieving together as a couple, then now we're not only feeling the grief of what we're we're losing or what we lost or what we're going through, but we're also feeling their grief as well. So it's getting magnified, which is a lot of pain and it's a lot of distress. But it's really remembering that the other person's not the enemy. They're not the enemy, and their intention of the way they're grieving is not to harm and hurt you or to make judgments of you. It's just learning to be able to stay on your side of the street. Basically, this is the way I'm grieving, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm inviting God into my grief, and knowing that they're grieving in the way that they're needing to grieve, and allowing them to grieve in that way.
Yeah. Would you say communication would be, I mean, it feels to me, and I'm curious your thoughts, but it feels to me like in that situation, communication to the extent that you're even able to explain is vital in that, to say, this is how I'm grieving. This is what I'm going through. This is how I'm processing. Basically, yeah, that feels like it would be vital to me. But I'm curious, the question would just be, how would you share that with your spouse? Like, how would you walk through that if you definitely are grieving differently? How do you continue to have grace and kindness and respect for what they're going through while also keeping in mind that you're still just like you said, you're still grieving yourself?
Grief is so complicated. Yes, communication would be great. Because if you could really stay curious and grounded, but remember, you're at an emotional intensity that you've never, you're like, I've never felt this before, like, especially a loss of a loved one or
Mhm.
loss of a child. And so, so some of that grounded, rational thought is out the
It's not
window
there. Yeah. Yeah.
because maybe you're in shock
Mhm.
or you're in denial. And it really is slowing down the pace,
Mhm.
slowing it down. Because if I'm going to start looking at, oh, well, you're not grieving the way I'd be grieving, now I'm distracting myself from what's going on inside of me
Yeah.
and really slowing it down and being able to go, okay, I, I'm going to give myself grace because I don't know what to do with this kind of pain.
Mhm.
Um, and if I start looking at them, then I'm increasing the pain of the other person instead of going, I've really got to slow this down and start to feel what's going on inside of me. And then the problem is often grief gets connected to other parts of unresolved pain in our stories. It seems to exasperate that. And being able to go, I'm going to slow this down and I'm going to invite people in and to truthful, like with your spouse, truthful, honest, open, vulnerable conversations.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm just going to just share with you that sometimes I may be, you know, frustrated and tense. But it's I don't know what to do with this pain. And that's where grief support, places help and being able to go with other people who are going through. I've always loved going with others in our pain with each other to support and encourage. And then also to invite God into it. God, I don't know how to do this. Will you come in and give me what I need? Because I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was thinking as you were sharing, like at some point, stepping out just beyond yourself and your spouse and into, if there's a support group or into some additional help, would you
Mhm.
suggest something like, seeing a therapist? And how would you determine, or if you should go like an individual route or go together? That might be like case by case dependent, but
Yeah.
you know, it, when you're dealing with something where you're really grieving something traumatic or tragic, what would be the next step once you kind of have moved past like dealing with it internally, and you're like, I need some more help, at this
Mhm.
point.
It is going to be an individual case, but as you were talking, I just was thinking of a family that lost a child in a tragic accident, and all the mother came to me, and really all we did, I think, for a year and a half was just some EMDR of every week of how God showed up for her that week
Mm.
to get her through. Just resourcing. Okay, let's just remember God's provision for you this week. And again, there's no time on grief. There's no getting over it. There are places where we come into more of a place of acceptance. But there's still always going to be that loss in our life. So yeah, sometimes the couple might come together, um, and just get a handle of a third party coming in and saying, "Hey, there's no judgment on the way that the two of you are grieving. It's
Right.
okay." Or the person might want to just come in for individual support, um, and being able to just let me get through this next week. But I hope you're hearing that there's not a one size fit all.
Yeah, there's not.
It's just like, hey, this is what's going on for you, and then there's the waves of grief. It's like an ocean wave. It comes, it intensifies,
Hmm.
it rolls out to the shore, and then it lessens, and then it rolls, and it's just it just we go through those waves, and we never know what's going to hit. It just kind of shows up, and here it is.
Yeah. And if
Um,
you might be
mhm,
on the, Gulf, and your
mhm,
husband might be
mm,
on the
uh-huh.
Atlantic Ocean, you know what I mean? The waves are coming in
Yes,
differently at different times.
yeah,
And yeah, I think what I'm hearing and what I'm grateful for is just acknowledging, hey, this conversation is hard, and it's unfortunately there isn't a 1, 2, 3 ABC like step
mm-mm,
to this. There isn't a formula. But I also think that can be encouraging or just relieving to take some of that weight off of like, I don't have to follow these specific steps. I just need
mhm.
to just take it at my pace and process. This is a
Yeah, and
kind of, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's so much grace for myself. Like
Yeah.
I just noticed that in the beginning, I just needed quiet. I couldn't go out a lot. It was the grace that my friends gave to me,
Hmm.
just to kind of like pull in for a little bit. I'm in year 1.5 now since
Okay.
Bill's been gone to be with Jesus, and it's now more of, okay, life is going on. I'm taking steps to move out and forward.
Hmm.
Like, what is life going to be like now? I'm not really sure. It's living in uncertainty. What's it going to look like? And again, inviting God into it.
Yeah.
Um, and knowing that again, I have to give grace for myself in this place of uncertainty, because there's not a blueprint.
Right. Right.
It,
As much as you wish there might be, there's just not.
yeah, there's not, and so it's continual connection with Jesus,
Hmm.
and just saying, okay, uh, I'm your bride.
Hmm.
I'm going to continue to seek after you, and ask you to be my shepherd right now.
Yeah. This is kind of a specific example,
Hmm.
but I do know that there are several women in our audience, especially in that like 25 to 35 age range, who have specifically dealt with this. And so thinking about something like a miscarriage, or losing a child, giving birth to a stillborn, something like that, you're
Mhm.
both grieving. You've got the mom and the dad grieving. They're grieving the loss of being parents. But then for the woman specifically, there's this very physical like grief as well, and the physical
Mhm.
changes to your body. Um, Anything, I know again, that's a really
Mm.
niche example, but I actually think it's one that affects so many. And so
Yes.
just curious if you would have anything to speak to that example.
Yeah. Yes. Both of my daughters have had miscarriages. One had one, and the other one had two. And they're so painful because the woman's body is readying itself for a child, for a baby. And then we have the hormonal events that are taking place when the miscarriage happens, and the loss, and then the woman's body, the mother's body, is trying to get readjusted again, and that loss of hope because there's that excitement.
Mhm.
I'm pregnant, and we're excited, and now there's that loss of hope.
Yeah.
But I'm like uh, encouraging these mothers, grieve as if this child has been born. Grieve as if it is one of your own. Grieve in giving it a name, giving it space, because it was from the time you felt that child within your body. It had time. It had life.
Yeah.
It had existence. And yes, it didn't have to see the evilness of this day or experience of that, and went directly into the arms of Jesus.
Mhm.
But it has the right to exist as if it had the fullness of life, and to give yourself permission to grieve in that way, to name that child, to plant a tree or a memorial for
Yeah.
the right, or create um, a ceremony or a box of what you would want to say to it when you get to meet it in eternity.
Yeah.
Um, of Because that child mattered. Um, that child mattered, and so the husband doesn't get to experience all of that in his body. So he doesn't know. He doesn't know what he doesn't know.
Mhm.
Um, and so as a mom, we can't, expectations are premeditated resentments. And so, which I can't expect him to understand what my body and soul have had to go through in the loss of this child. And so if I'm expecting him to understand that, then I'm going to resent him, which is the impaired side of hurt. Now I'm feeling hurt, and he doesn't even know what he doesn't know. And he can try to understand and have empathy for her, but he doesn't know what her body's gone through, and he doesn't know what she's had to feel, and he doesn't know the disappointment, and even the letting go in the miscarriage,
Yeah.
and the shock of it, because it's not pretty.
Mhm.
Um, it's not pleasant, but neither was the cross. The cross was not pretty. It wasn't pleasant to look
Mhm.
at.
Mhm.
And so her body is having to experience that. Um, and he doesn't have any, he doesn't know what that is. The husband doesn't. And so recognizing again, to not put that expectation on her husband to know, but then to also invite Jesus in, because he does know. He does know. He does see that child did matter. Her loss does matter. The disappointment does matter. And to invite him into the disappointment is so very important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for unpacking that um, with us. Like I said, I think I know we just took some time to unpack it, but I think it's
Mhm.
so helpful to process that because it is something that so many women and men and husbands and wives experience together. So just wanted to
Mhm.
acknowledge that for sure. And I appreciate you walking me through that.
Yes.
You've kind of alluded to this throughout our conversation and woven it throughout, how to invite Jesus in, saying things like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, I don't know what is going on. Invite him into the pain, into the grief. I'm curious, with your personal experience, what you've walked couples through, individuals through, how do you see the character of God amidst grief? Where do you see him, and where do you see his character during pain and suffering? I know that's a loaded question, but
yes, it is very loaded. Because in my before the healing from my trauma, there was a place I'd asked God, why,
right.
And then he brought me through this process of what now, and now it's like, why not me? But where we have to understand in the character of God is he never meant it to be this way. He had us in the Garden of Eden. He had us in the Eden glory. He had us in full relationship with him. He never meant it to be this way. And so he's like I remember driving home from Texas to Tennessee, praying for my son-in-law in the wheelchair. And I felt God's anger with me. He was angry that this suffering was happening on top of the suffering we were already going through. I feel his sadness. I feel out, and there's been times where Bill was such a gift in my life. He was, we were so close. We were so married to Jesus together and such partners that the anguish and the pain of losing him and my cry out has felt too much. And I would cry because I know not to miss that step in grief, to have the cry out, in the pain and to feel the despair and the hopelessness in it, because it hurts so deeply. And then to feel the peace of God wash over me. Like, I can't make that up. I can't make up his presence coming in the midst of the deepest anguish of my soul. And so I know his character wants to be with us in it. I know that he never meant it to be this way. I know he wants me to know that he is never going to leave me nor forsake me, that he is going to provide for me what his provision is there for me. But he doesn't mind me coming to him in my honesty and my truth.
Yeah.
Like, this is too much. Like, I cannot get through this. This is too hard. I need you help, God. And that's the Psalms. Those are the cry outs of the Psalms. And in the cry out is where we find intimacy with God. But if I'm pretending like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, then I'm going to miss the closeness that God has for me.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm vividly remembering, I wasn't sure if there was going to be an appropriate space to share this either, but I lost my father to alcoholism about 10 years ago, almost a decade ago. And I went through those stages of grief too, that why me, why him, why my family, that anger. And I was seeing a therapist to help me process that. And one of the most real things that I carry with me to this day that helped me see God and see the character of God through that was I was challenged to put myself back in the hospital room with him and close my eyes, remember that moment. And she asked me, where was God in the room? And, for so long I had wanted to just push out and say, oh, he wasn't there. I was just dealing with that on my own. I just he was absent. And it took coming to this revelation and this recognition that he was next to me. He was sitting next to me. He was in the room. I was weeping and he was weeping. I was crying and screaming and angry, and he was crying and screaming and angry. And he was in the room. I could just see the presence of God in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me really process and say, I wasn't just going through it. Like I wasn't just there by myself, like alone in a void, But
That's beautiful.
it took some time to really process that. It took time to get there. That didn't happen right away for sure.
Right. But that takes courage. Because you're going into the depths of your pain and you're going into the hard places of you don't want to lose your father. And you didn't you didn't want this in your life. And neither does Jesus. And that's why God gave us his son.
Yeah.
It's like he knew that he wanted us to have eternal hope. And like Bill is living fully now in that. He's home.
Yeah.
He's living fully, and your dad is hopefully living fully too.
Yeah.
In that hope and in that home. And that's what Jesus is like, I want you to know that this is not our home. We are going to have tribulation. We are going to have trials. We are going to have sufferings, but I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am here with you. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So we've talked about the importance of seeking connection and intimacy with God in grief and bringing him into it. And I want to bring it back as we're nearing the end of our time. I want to bring it back to the couples and just ask, how important is it to maintain, to the best of your ability, like connection and intimacy during seasons of grief? Like, how do you go about doing that and making sure that you aren't growing bitter, you're not harboring resentment, and you're finding ways to connect with one another, be intimate with one another, and just lean on each other? What would you say to that?
As you're talking, it's such a sad thing that when a couple loses a child, often a divorce happens because of the way they are grieving so differently, because the pain is so great. And I just want to encourage the couple to. That's where the enemy is going to come in to steal, kill, and destroy. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of allowing the pain to come into each of your hearts and to invite God into it, to be able to feel the distress of that pain and to get help, to invite a counselor in to say, let me go with you in this, to come alongside you, just like you were asking, Marley, to invite Jesus into this pain. Where was Jesus when this happened? Let help, allow yourself to get the help that you need, to come in and to, again, to the best of your ability, to understand that you don't have a blueprint for this. You're going to feel a lot of things. You're going to feel the shock of it. You're going to feel the betrayal of it. You're going to feel the disappointment of it, of the things that you're going through. And to the best of your ability to stand with judgment, to give each other grace, to ask for your friends, please pray for us right now.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do. And if there's those friends that are saying, well, just get over it, like, ask someone else.
Yeah.
Because there's no time limit on the grace that you're going through. And there's not another time in life, I think, in the world right now where we need each other, where we can't do this alone. We need each other to come alongside each other and say, hey, right now in this moment, am I okay? I'm okay. I only have the grace for today. God, give me the grace to get through this day. Do I have breath? What am I trying to hold on to? What am I trying to control? Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe I need to exhale. Maybe I need to let go of this right now. Maybe I need to feel and invite God into. Okay. And it's just this day, or maybe it's just this moment. Can I find the breath, the inhale of God, help me,
Mhm.
and the exhale, I'm okay right now.
Mhm.
Um, what's the next step I need to take? What's the next breath I need to take? What's the next thing I need to do? And it's just one day at a time. And not to go down that road because you don't know how you're going to get down through the next
Mhm.
month or the next day or the next week. You don't know how you're going to get through it, but how can I get through this day? Jesus, help me this day. And for the couple, it may be just that. It may be just to help us get through this day. But one thing, I'll tell you this quick story. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
When Bill and I were at MD Anderson, we just got the news from the doctor that this cancer was going to lead him home to
Mhm.
death. We were in the waiting room, just kind of shocked and just sitting there. And Bob Goff shows up.
Okay.
Okay. And he flew to MD Anderson. He shows up and he's got this big bag and he's got this cup with, yellow liquid in it. And he pulls out boxing gloves and he hands them to us and they have our names on them. These nice boxing gloves. And he said, the boxing gloves are a reminder not to fight each other, but to fight cancer. And that's such a reminder. This grief that you're going through is not to fight each other. It's to fight for the grief. It's to fight for each other, not against each other. And then he had the urine cup. It wasn't, he said, this is a urine cup. It wasn't. He went by Burger King and he got,
Sounds like something he
uh,
would do. I don't know,
yes,
but it sounds like something.
he got oil. They asked him if he wanted hot or cold oil. And he said, yeah, I just need some cold oil. So he got Burger King oil and then he came and anointed Bill's head with oil and NV Anderson and prayed over us, which was beautiful, Burger King oil, And, but the boxing gloves I still have, and it really is that reminder, hey, fight the cancer in your life. The cancer is the grief.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't fight each other. Fight the grief. The thing that the enemy has come to steal, kill, and destroy from you that's taken from you, that God never meant for you to lose or to have.
Mhm.
That's what you're fighting.
Yeah.
You're fighting against that, not each other.
Yeah. I I can't say anything to that. That's beautiful. I'm It's just so evident how the Lord has used you and Bill, your story, your family, to heal your like individually and help others
Mhm.
heal. I just feel so grateful to even be on the other end of this conversation and facilitating it with you. And I'm grateful for your encouragement and your words. Yeah. Is there anything else that I don't know how you can top that story, but is there anything else you would like to share with us as we wrap our time together today?
I I just, I'm just loving us. I talk with John and Stacey Eldridge quite a bit, and I love what they're doing in calling us to continue to understand um, how much Jesus loves us and how to love Him in return. And I think it's just continuing in the despair of life to continue to encourage one another that He really wants us to have union with Him, oneness with Him, um, and to continue to know that love will conquer, um, and how to continue to go out even in the midst of loss and grief. What helps me is gratitude, gratitude for the time I had with Bill, gratitude for the way God was with me and is with me, and how to, okay, let me continue to go out and love in the way people have loved me, in the way that God has loved me, and go out and love well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate you just being open with us, sharing with us, and encouraging us. And I'm grateful that you're just honest in, hey, like I've dealt with this, but I still don't have a recipe for this. And the
No,
goal is just to encourage and move, like you said, for the individual, move one day at a time, one breath at a time, and for the
yes.
couple to fight the grief, not one another.
Yes,
So thank you so much
absolutely.
for your time, Laurie.
It's been a delight to be with you. Your kind and tender heart is so evident. Thank you for letting me join you in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to the Wind-Shaped Marriage podcast, listening to this tough but necessary conversation. I hope that there was something in here that was just helpful for your heart as you are walking through a season of grief, or as you may one day. Join us next week for a new episode. Hey there! If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more marriage resources. And let us know what you think of this episode in the comments below.